Welcome to Tea Talks, where young adult stories and church experience blend into a beautiful insight to inspire us. So grab a cup, sit down, relax, and enjoy while we spill the tea. Today I have with me my new friend Elizabeth. Welcome. I am so happy you accept the invitation to be here with us and make this video series.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I am a mother of two. My husband and I have moved around quite a bit throughout our marriage, and so we recently moved to the Asheville area, and we are about a year into our new church, and that's where we're at.
How has been you don't have to say just at this church specifically, but how has been your experience as a young adult in church?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster. We moved around quite a bit once we got married, and have had a hard time always finding a church that really fit our needs based on where we were in our lives. I think the hardest transition was when we had children, and trying to figure out how to manage having young kids that weren't always quiet in church or didn't always behave the way that the church wanted them to, and figure out how to fit in the church without being an obstacle or a stumbling block to others in the church.
Tell me a little bit more about that. How do you feel like, what is the pressure as a mom with small kids? How has this pressure affected you?
I grew up in a family that was very involved in the church. We were at church every weekend. It was expected. My mom had 3 kids, and she walked in with all 3 of us in tow, dressed perfectly, not a hair out of place, and she led Sabbath school, and we knew how to toe the line and what was expected of us, and I wanted my children to grow up in that church environment and to have those expectations. I never realized how hard it was.
You have a whole new appreciation for your mom.
Oh my goodness, she is a person with superhuman powers to be able to get kids dressed and ready and out the door in the morning on time, and then how to set that expectation to sit quietly during a sermon in the sanctuary. We went to several churches in the beginning when we first had our son, and consistently got just disparaging remarks. We even had some people that were sitting by us at one point, and they just got up in the middle of the sermon and left, and found us afterwards to let us know that they left because my son was too loud, and he was not even 1 yet and just happened to be having a fussy day. And it got to the point where it just kind of felt like me going to church was becoming a stumbling block to other people, and I just didn't want to go. So there was a good period of time when my son was younger that we didn't go. I would go to Sabbath school with him, and then we would just leave.
So you are at this point where you want to be a mom like your mom, because yes. She was a great example. She, first of all, with 3 kids, she was a hero to be able to keep everybody in place.
Yes.
You wanted to do the same thing, but then the community where you were at was a little too judgy, actually telling you. So how did that, I want to get into you, Elizabeth. What were you feeling at this point that made you not even want to go to church?
I had a lot of shame where I just felt like maybe I was a terrible mother because my mom had 3 kids, and my dad worked in the medical community. He was not with us most weekends, and she kept all 3 of us entertained and happy and loving church and behaving, and to my knowledge, she didn't get those remarks. Maybe that was just my view from being a kid. And so I just felt like, why can't I do that? Especially when I just had 1 with my son. And then I felt like I was failing my son because I wanted him to grow up in that church experience, but I was allowing those remarks to keep me from going to church because I felt like I was causing a problem. So it was hard. It was hard to not go to church, and it was hard to go to church. I kind of felt stuck. And my husband works in the medical field as well, and so he wasn't there, so it was me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I would look for somebody else in the church that maybe could sit with us and could help me with my son. And it was hard to find that too, because I would have friends that would say, oh yeah, I'll sit with you, I'll help you. But they didn't have kids, and so they'd get distracted or they'd forget, and I'd still end up in the same situation. So it was easier not to go.
Do you feel that, I don't know where you are in this journey yet. Now you have 2 kids and you're a little bit older. Do you feel like maybe the pressure that, well, let's not even talk about the rest of the people, because I don't think anybody should have put pressure on you. But did you get to a point where you were like, you know what, the expectations that I put on myself were a little too much? Or do you still feel like that was the right amount of expectation? Well, how do you feel?
So, like I said, we moved around quite a bit. And so we weren't always even in the same state throughout our marriage, and different churches were very different. So in the beginning, I felt like it was very much the church kind of putting that on us. And I was even asked at one point, why don't you just take him in the nursery, don't have him in here? And I was raised that I wanted my kids to be in the sanctuary and to learn how to sit in the sanctuary and listen to the sermon, and you didn't take your kid to the nursery unless you absolutely had to. So to me, it just felt like they were saying, well, you're a failure of a mother, so you might as well just go where we don't have to listen to it. But then we moved on and we went to another church, and my son was still young. And that church, I feel like I put it on myself in that church. I came in with this just concern on my shoulders that, well, here we go again, it's gonna be a mess. I'm gonna do what I can, people are gonna be frustrated, and then no one even had to say anything to me. I caught a side eye, and maybe they were just thinking my baby was cute, but to me it was, here we go again.
Well, that's trauma.
Yes.
That's trauma. You know, you had triggers there when you've had that experience before. Now you're feeling like it's going to be the same way here.
Yes. In the church that we are in now, I have 2 kids now, and my youngest is kind of in that phase where she's really rambunctious and she's all over the place. And the first time that I took them both to church by myself, I was just sure it was going to be a nightmare, and it absolutely was. They did a children's church, and so my son was just, we have to stay, I want to be a part of this. And so we did, and my daughter was sitting kind of in the front, getting ready to, listening to the children's story. And they did puppets. And it was one of those things where they had like a scaffolding and they have the curtain hanging over. And as soon as the puppets popped up to the top, my daughter rips away from me, runs up, pulls the curtain, and simultaneously reaches to grab a puppet. And I just died inside. So then not only was she making a scene, but I had to go up on stage in front of all of the church and grab my daughter, and I couldn't leave the sanctuary because if I left, my son would fall apart if he can't see me, and of course it's still a new church environment for him. So I have her over to the side, I'm trying to calm her down, and I look over and our pastor and his wife are right there, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna hear about this afterwards. I have failed. We're never coming back to this church again. And I got her calm, and we got back to our seats, and the lady behind me reached forward and she put her hand on my shoulder, and I thought, here it comes. And I turn around and she goes, girl, I feel you. I have 4 of them myself. And she goes, some days they're just curious. She goes, and that was great. She just has a love for life and wanted to explore. And it totally caught me off guard because I had never had that response before. And I never knew I needed to hear that. And then while I'm sitting in the pew, the people behind me, they were seeing that I was struggling with my daughter. They kept leaning forward and they'd talk to her and tickle her and play with her. And it made it so much easier for me. And here, I'm in a new church. I don't even know any of these people. And so afterwards, they had a meal in the fellowship hall, and they had an area where the kids could run and play, and my son, that was why he wanted to stay, because he wanted to be there for that. So we were there, and I was sitting at a table by myself, because that's what you do and you're new. And I saw the pastor's wife come over, and I was kind of bracing myself, because I was like, okay. And as soon as, she didn't have a chance, as soon as she came up to me, I was just like, I'm so sorry, I know you saw my daughter, and she's just really enthusiastic. And she just stopped me and gave me this huge hug. And she goes, girl, we've all been there. We've all had kids, and I just love your daughter and her passion for life. And she was so excited to see those puppets, and that's why we want puppets, because kids like them. And she goes, don't ever apologize for your kids here when they are showing enthusiasm for God and for the program. And I went home and I told my husband, and I cried, and I said, I've always heard of this thing called your church family, but I never knew what that really meant until I found where we are now.
That made me want to cry. It's so amazing how it's not difficult to be a welcoming church, but we make it so difficult. One of the things when I actually planted a church in the Raleigh area, and we had a bunch of kids. And that's one of the things. Yes, I'm not saying, hey, just be completely disrespectful and just be running around and doing whatever you want. But I'd rather have a church that is loud with kids than a church that is dying because they pushed all of the kids away from it. And it made, your story was so personal to me because the exactly same thing, very similar, happened to me. My son was 1 year old, and we were in this new church. First time we went there, and he got up for a moment and he walked in the not hallway, like in between the pews. He did like a few steps. I grabbed him, taking him back, and somebody tapped me in the back and said, "We don't allow kids to walk around." I sank. I felt horrible, and that was the first and the last time I ever came to this church. Obviously, I don't think we need to get too much into it, but now. In general terms, I say we don't need to get too much into the next question just because you already gave the answer. But now in the general terms, how important it is for young families, for young adults to have a warm community.
It changed everything. This is the first time in my life where I feel completely comfortable to take both of my children to church without my husband being there, and know that, hey, if they're not perfect and it's not the dream scenario, it's gonna be okay. Someone's gonna help me. People aren't gonna condemn me for it. I'm not gonna leave feeling like a failure. I'm gonna leave feeling like I tried and it didn't work out the way I wanted, but it's okay. And because I survived this, I can try again the next time.
How did that community, because from what you said, you were raised a Christian. Mm-hmm. How did that community help you grow spiritually?
It's like I'm experiencing my faith all over again from a new direction. Growing up in it, I always knew it was expected of me, and I knew how to act that way, and I felt that that was important. Now, I don't think about what's expected of me. I think about what can I do to help someone else who's struggling, because man, I know what that feels like. Or how can I help this community that has helped me so much? Right now, I'm teaching one of the Sabbath schools. I have never done anything like that or ever felt comfortable to lead out like that in anything. And it's just the pre-K, so it's just the little kids. But that's a huge step for me. Yes. That I wouldn't have taken had I not felt supported. And like now maybe it's my job to pay it back to help other moms that are struggling and having that same concern. And we kind of sit together now, and I look for other moms that are there without their spouse, and I'm like, okay, you sit on this side of the pew, and I'll sit on this side, and we'll corral the kids in the middle. And that's so great because now I look forward to doing that versus just dreading being there because what are my kids going to do and what am I going to have to apologize for this time?
It's such a simple concept, but it's still not practiced. A warm community. Look, for me, it's what really like puzzles me. It's just see that I was raised in the church. In your case, you were raised in the church, but it only really felt like your church, your family, when you found that community that helped you.
Yes.
And it's not only embracing your children, but embraced your family, and that helped you develop a closer relationship with God. This is amazing. The next question is actually about something you just mentioned. It's like, how do you envision yourself helping to create this warm community for other people?
My husband and I have always wanted to be involved, but we've had a hard time finding churches where either there was a space for us to be involved that we were comfortable in, or finding something that we had passion about, because we didn't want to just insert ourselves into something that we didn't really care about because we knew that we wouldn't stick with it. And now we're both very involved. And we love it, and we're doing things that we have a passion for and that speak to what matters to us. And I think that furthers our faith, and it also makes us feel more like we're a part of our community. And it also helps us feel like we're giving back to a church family that has really become a family. We have no relatives or friends that we knew previously here, so we really had to reinvent everything when we got here. And I work from home, and so I don't have the opportunity to really make friends with coworkers. Church is really my opportunity to meet
family.
people. And yeah, and I was really nervous about that because I've always worked outside of the home. And so moving, I knew that I wasn't going to have that opportunity. And I didn't know how I was going to make friends or how I was going to meet people, and I've never made friends through the church.
Wow.
It's always been, I'm so focused on my children and just getting us through that I don't have time to socialize and meet other people. But it's been completely different, and now I've met other moms that have kids that are my kids' ages, and we hang out, and our church does a really good job of creating events and spaces for those of us who have kids about the same age to meet each other and hang out. They did a paint night. After church, we all went to the water hole. We've gone to a park together and did a nature walk with the kids, and it's great because the kids all get to know each other and the parents all get to know each other, and it's creating a community outside of just what happens every weekend.
What do you have to say? This is my last question. What do you have to say for this mother, this young family that have not found yet this warm community?
Keep looking, because it's out there. It took me years, and I never thought I needed it until I found it, and it's just changed everything. I told my husband, I'm not moving anymore.
We're staying here.
We're done. We are putting down roots. I'll never find this again.
Yes. Don't give up on God because of people,
yes.
Right? Like, keep looking. God is going to find the right place for you. Elizabeth, this was wonderful. I am so happy to get to know you a little better and have this conversation. Thank you for coming and participating on this project.
Thank you.
And for you, thank you for joining Tea Talks. Keep stirring up the conversations and embracing the beautiful and the messiness of life. And until next time.